Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group. I'm Riley.
And I'm Krista.
We're going to dive into anger today.
Love it.
Feelings have feelings, and they know when they're unwanted and will cooperate by going underground. Anger cooperates by pretending it doesn't exist. It's impossible to accept an unwanted feeling, and until you simply allow and acknowledge a feeling, it will persist. That's all you need to do. Tell your feelings, I see you, you belong to me. Someone
say who that is.
Oh, Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
And I just know how the visual representation, how I've applied this to my life is forms of meditation and visualizing myself on the beach with sailboats going by. And then you can put whatever emotional feeling you're feeling on that boat. And you can see it, acknowledge it's part of you, but also let it drift on by out of view. That's something I've used as a practice.
That's perfect. That's what Rohr uses. So, I mean, he doesn't use the sailboat, but he uses the allow it, include it, love it, let it go.
When our physical, emotional, sexual, intellectual, and spiritual boundaries are violated, anger is God-given, emotional, that restores that boundary that was violated. Anger is not rage. Anger is not vindictiveness. Anger is the angel with the sword of truth. I will not let you treat that child this way. James Finley.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about before this started how, I think Deepak is a really solid teacher. Obviously, James Finley, Richard Rohr, but people who can honor the whole human experience and how I really have a problem with some of these spiritual teachers that talk and teach from on high. And I heard I think it was Guru Singh, but it was a Kundalini teacher on a podcast saying, unless someone hits you with a brick, no one's abusing you. And basically, like, it's all in your ego mind that you're offended and hurt. And, I find that extremely dangerous to be teaching that to people, because that's exactly what would cause us to go, okay, like that's what happened to me. What I was reading these books about these.
Well, it overrides your discernment, right? It goes, no, you should not have discernment about people that might treat you bad. You should just elevate above those emotions.
Yeah, you should. No one can, because there is true, like no one can ultimately, at that level, no one can ultimately say anything. Like when you're at a really high self-love, and I'm experiencing it right now where I feel like I'm like immune to narcissists right now. It's like they can do whatever, and I can go, oh, that's so about them, and it doesn't hurt you. But to say that to spiritual abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse.
Well, to me, it's you can use spiritual language to make anything okay or anything not okay. I mean, if you really want to get into it, technically, no one's even actually ever touching you when they think you're touching you. Like what are we actually talking about?
Because we're air inside, right? And water.
Well, and the cells never technically ever touch. It's all in your mind. The pain. Like, what are you really saying? What is the goal of that message? Really, what I'm getting at is because any message can be manipulated to.
I mean, Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, I've listened to some of his podcasts, and I don't like somehow he kind of puts down people that feel anger. And why do you need to feel anger? I mean, in his, how dare I say this? He's one of the greatest, most successful spiritual teachers of the century. And I read his book, and I struggled with it because it was used by my necessary nemesis constantly against me. Took those sayings to constantly put it against me. And I am someone who is very surrendered to what is and breathing in. So, I mean, I am a follower of the untethered soul that I naturally do surrender to divine providence.
I think ultimately the message that we're trying to portray with this morning is discernment when dealing with spiritual teachings is probably one of the most important steps to everything. There's gems in so many spiritual lessons, but if you don't have the discernment to when to apply it, it could be used to be allowed to be taken advantage of. And
it's the same thing of sitting in a church pew and the pastor makes these sweeping generalizations and it's like, oh my God, and you're just like under this yoke of bondage. And if you're really open-hearted and wanting to be good, it can really harm you. So the message of the anger is what I loved what James Finley said, that angel with the flaming sword that says, you will not hurt this child, and how we protect ourselves by honoring what's not okay. Yeah?
Let's hear what your anger has to say.
Okay. I want to hear what my anger wants to say. It's there because I'm waking up to the years I allowed horrendous things to be said and done to me. Enough is enough. The anger I refer to here is as our guidance because we're in a toxic relationship or something needs to be protected or honored. Throughout my life, if I allowed myself to feel, to love, and care for myself, I would have heard 4 sentences in my vernacular that would have helped me make a U-turn. This is flipping ridiculous. This is disturbing. This is disgusting. And if the offender wasn't willing to look at the situation, F off. The F off is to the unwelcome behavior. It's the walk away, not usually saying F off, but the fierceness of the phrase said to myself keeps me moving with a fierceness that doesn't collapse or acquiesce into the crazy making, head spinning, and gaslighting. It calls bullshit on the bullshit. It knows what's in line with truth and love and won't be sold that what it needs isn't valid. It knows it's able to go elsewhere. Now we've got 8 billion people and counting to find it. It finds it also within itself. Everyone processes anger differently to move through it in a healthy way. For me, my anger doesn't need a punching bag, and no one needs to take it out on someone. I don't need to scream in a padded room. The remedy for my anger isn't to transmit it or even get it out of my body in the same way as other traumas. I allow it, include it, love it, let it go. That's Richard Rohr's teaching. The anger flows out of my body and all my cells because I'm 99.9% air and my cells turn over constantly. I embrace it, love it, and transcend into my indestructible self that isn't wounded or violated. I don't spiritually bypass. I witness and learn from my feelings. So I want to make a point with that, is that you do, it is holding the both. It's not like you go, okay, Krista, run from your anger. It's you can see yourself that is struggling and angry, and you can be aware, kind of like rowing away home, of the part of you that is the watcher. So you get still and you're able to observe that fire, that not okayness of what needs to be honored and protected, where that angel that is speaking, going, I will not let this child be harmed. but that you realize you are not that, and that's an Eckhart Tolle teaching, which is really great, is you do not need to over-identify with the small self. You are actually the infinite self that is watching you. That is the truth. And so you can watch that. And right there, when you are watching that, not needing to put your anger into the shadow because it's unwanted, it's holding both. Is that clear?
So I guess what I'm hearing is instead of reacting on your anger, you're asking your anger's questions. You're not pushing your anger down. You're going, okay, anger, what are you trying to tell me? What's the message here?
There you go.
Is that?
You're so awesome. I love you. Yes. And you're not immediately bypassing it. You're not spiritually bypassing. I don't spiritually bypass, which means the bypass is, can't allow that ugly thing there.
Well, that's where the spiritual goes, oh, you shouldn't ever feel anger. So you go, okay, well, I don't need to have discernment about why I'm being angry. No, I just need to evolve past it. Maybe that's something in my shortcoming, which is just maybe allowing yourself to be put into a situation for you to be abused further.
Yes.
A great deal.
I witness and learn from my feelings. A great deal of my suffering has come from not honoring my anger. A great deal of my suffering has come from not honoring my anger. An enormous amount of my patterns of abuse have continued because I have not honored my anger.
What you permit is what you promote.
What you permit is what you promote. The patriarchal system, being bullied, being shamed for my needs and emotions, unskillful teaching that makes all anger bad, my own denial of my feelings, my desire to be a loving person and not knowing how to have my anger and still love well, all contributed to my not allowing myself to fully acknowledge that something wasn't okay. Also, my false self, my idealized self, that didn't want to acknowledge that I actually had anger. It's also part of my almost the self-righteousness.
It's like your monk ego.
Oh.
Right? It's like your spiritual ego.
Oh, that's so good. But I allowed all of that to happen. I make amends to myself if I betrayed myself. I put balm on my wounds, and great compassion wraps his wings around me, and together we help me bounce into my true self. I recently noticed that my deepest truth comes out of my mouth when I'm alone. It's my boundary, my integrity, my internal no or yes that blurts out. That's how I came up with those 4 sentences to alert me and give me permission to feel my feelings. I realized I always heard those sentences, but didn't know how to act on them. That mechanism was broken. Now I really hear those sentences. It's the fire I need to create my life in line with life. When I was in the relationship with my necessary nemesis for that short period of time, my anger was so shut down by his shaming of my emotions and needs. I lost the fire I needed to move me out of the situation. 5 months after the relationship finally ended and 6 weeks after I reconnected with him on that ski hill that I refer to in Ideas, Not Identity, I gently shared with him the serious trauma I experienced from his abuse. He completely dismissed it and felt neither empathy nor remorse. This was consistent with who I experienced him to be. Immediately after that, I became aware of his tangled web that he was now caught in. I was then honest with him in an email and basically told him to F off. I let him know that I saw the man behind the curtain and knew the truth of who he was. In that moment that I sent the email, I had a vision. A woman stood at her outdoor clothesline in an open field. The time period was over a century ago. She shook out a large, natural-colored sheet. As she shook the sheet, my lifelong pattern of the Stockholm Syndrome, which is hyperempathy and bonding to abusers, shook out with it. Like a snake uncoiling through my body, within a few seconds, I broke that pattern. I was free as a sheet blowing in the wind. The woman who shook the sheet was calm and present. Once I set that boundary with that man and warned him I would no longer protect him, I knew I did what I needed to do. I felt light and let the anger go. I knew his pathology took away his freedom to do any other. He didn't have the wiring to be any other way. When I did break my silence to a few people, I was seen by a woman as not in forgiveness. She told me many things, one of which was, taking the wounded male down is not the answer. And she said that because she was very threatened, her own personal standing in the community by him being exposed. So then that's when people use these spiritual bullshit platitudes to shut people down. It's how victims are silenced. It's no wonder we silence our anger and push it into our shadow. It's quite clear I wasn't coming from vindictiveness or had any of the thoughts or feelings going on in my mind or body this woman assumed I had. It's the both and. I can be free from hate and resentment and speak the truth. My anger toward that man is welcome again if something else arises. There's like nothing left. No anger's ever going to come. I've just so done the work. There's no pretending my anger isn't there to make amends, to make myself feel spiritual. There's wisdom in this appropriate anger. I can then let my anger go when I hear what it wants to tell me. There's so much crazy going on in the world. It's the healthiest thing I know to do, to hear myself say what I know to be true. No longer do I doubt my truth and absurdities. I thank healing from abuse from that. Enough is enough. I think about all those years I was silent and let others run roughshod over me as if they knew better than I. My internal voice was, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I feared my anger, but now I know how to have my anger serve as a messenger to me and not vomit it all over others, except in extreme cases. My anger shows me where I'm not in integrity, split between my internal no and external yes, by allowing what's being foisted on me. There's a time for a no when it screams at you on the inside is a sure one. That internal scream may feel like anger. And I'm just thinking about when I was married and that scripture about don't let the sun go down on your anger. And like that being misinterpreted, that make sure you don't have any anger when you go to bed. And so you're always, nothing's ever dealt with. You can never go, my anger is saying, this is unlivable. This is not okay. But you have to keep pushing it in the shadow every time you feel anger because you shouldn't feel that anger. Now I honor my anger as the gift it is. I feel sorrow for how I ignored my anger, or didn't express her in emotional sobriety and hurt others. My anger alerts me to pay attention to some of my highest values of what is right and in truth. It's setting a beautiful fire around me. Love comes in and out, but I have my anger to set the boundaries to protect what deserves to be protected. The great love affair is romancing this along. When I listen the first time she speaks, my fire doesn't have to get bigger to get my attention. My lioness has shown up, calm but alert, standing as she shifts back and forth under the acacia tree. She wants me to fully see her, love her, and embrace her as the gift she is. As I edit this chapter on this Thanksgiving Day, I honor those whose land this was before we white people took it, which is true, no matter what the indigenous did before, right? Of who they took. We did take it. Yep. That was neither honored nor protected. I honor and am thankful for my lioness and for how anger, when used in service, helps us love well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care. I got to say something. I thought that was very interesting that I said how the lioness was under the acacia tree and that what we have learned about the acacia and psychedelics. And I'm just, again, the psychedelic thing being in that, the big view.
Well, I want to say it's the Black Panther that will intentionally chew on the acacia leaves and have DMT, will have hallucinogenic experiences. So we aren't the only animal out there that likes their hallucinogenic experiences.
Well, and it's just, if you'd even take away the hallucinogenic, but I just thought the psychedelic brain to me is the brain that is so present. Like I said, it's like being on drugs. It's so dropped in because it's this wider view connected to the field of love, right?
Yeah.
And seeing into it's a new way to see.
So first question is, how do you examine and process your anger? Obviously, I started off by sharing one of my processes. I know how helpful that has been, really at separating between anger that is fleeting, like someone did something to you that maybe they're just having a bad day. Yes, I didn't like that, but it's something I'm able to let go. And then there's that anger where you go, no, you need to change an aspect of your life. What are you going to do about it? Because whatever's making you angry is probably going to happen again. And so to me, differentiating between those two, the meditation process of viewing my anger as a boat that is floating on by, and kind of what my game plan is, has been very helpful.
Can you share, Riley, your practice of not texting and how you handle relationships?
Well, I believe, again, communication is this beautiful tool to connect. And I think we have been misusing it as a tool of projection. So I personally don't believe in having any important conversations over text message because I've never seen it be beneficial. Text message, in my opinion, is where, when, and, a basic how are you, but like, it's really like, where are we meeting? How, it's like check-ins. To have I feel like it's kind of rude to have a meaningful conversation through text message, because I think it is intentionally limiting the feedback that you're able to give. I think you aren't able to truly understand how someone is receiving the information that you're trying to portray, to share with them. I think it is one of the biggest examples of emotional vomiting that we have. I don't think it is. I don't think someone that is emotionally good at regulating themselves will choose to have a emotional conversation over text message.
Say that one last time. You think of someone. Say that last time, because that was so good. That very last thing.
I don't think someone that is good at regulating their emotions,
someone that is good at it,
would choose to have an emotional conversation over text message, because I don't believe it serves anybody. I don't believe it serves the person that is releasing that information, and I don't believe it serves the person receiving it, because it's so unlikely that the message is truly received properly.
And one thing I'm aware of is that feeling of, I feel so much anger, I've got to offload it. I've got to use this energy to vomit it on someone else, to tell them, until I set this boundary and tell them and speak my mind. Like they think that's what the anger is about, is fueling it in that. And I have been guilty of that. It's like, until I write this out or vomit it on someone else. And that is part of high narcissism cannot handle those uncomfortable feelings. And so they spew them out. They can't hold them within themselves and metabolize it through. Yeah.
Well, so the nuance of hard red lines and obscure red lines, right? So I was listening to someone talk about how world wars start. They start from obscure red lines being crossed. So, right, it's no one really wants to go into world war, but when the boundaries aren't clear and what you are willing to protect isn't, clear and displayed, like our boundaries in our own lives, that's when war breaks out. When we are subtle with our boundaries is when war breaks out. No one wants to go to war. But when we aren't clear with our boundaries, having those strong red lines, we are creating the environment for war to happen. And obviously, I'm using a world perspective to try and apply it to our everyday lives. But I think it is very relevant in the sense of like no one wants confrontation, but confrontation is needed, especially when you need to communicate what are your red lines and not be obscure and vague with what your boundaries are.
I'm looking at my own self and go, oh, it's because I betrayed myself, because I dropped my standards, because I wanted something out of the relationship. And that's where the anger's coming up, because I wasn't clear. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, you crossed that boundary. I'm like, now I am right now. I was just sharing this morning. I'm like, oh my God, I would never tolerate that.
Well, I was listening in a relationship podcast, and this woman was talking about how she always dates the men and they treat her all the same. And it's all these negative ways that they treat her. And I go, and what popped into my head was your boundaries are assumed, not communicated. You're assuming that these things, sadly, our society has degraded to the point where what most people would assume is a mutual value is just not true anymore. We do not hold the same values as everybody. And I think a lot of our problems root in getting into relationships, whether that's business, friendships, or intimate relationships, and you don't understand these person's values, whether you don't communicate yours so they don't understand yours, or they don't communicate theirs and you just assume that yours line up with them.
Oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. When you think about the dating, of that you would go like, what? But it's like, the whole field now of how Facebook is used for dating as a dating app, and all the dating apps that have made it almost okay to always be shopping for other partners while you're in a relationship. And you would go, what? But it's like, it's again, that's so good. Like, really, well, what are your morals? What do you believe? This is so good. So the offloading of the anger, that's the death. That's the ego death, where you are so wanting to love that you will suffer in your own pain before vomiting your pain onto another person. You will allow the tenderness and the grief and the needing to put balm on your own heart than rage or hurt another person back.
Your anger is meant to protect you and set boundaries, not to project and destroy other people. Even when someone else hurt you, your anger isn't for you to hurt them back.
Yeah. And that is actually not, when you talk about what morals or whatever, that's not taught. Like you would assume that that would be right. You would go, well, yeah, but that's not what's being even celebrated in society of this, fierce, whatever, bitchiness that we can come out and wow, when someone's coming from true power of to have power over themselves, where they can choose their words with such skill and connection and boundaries, that is a Wonder Woman. That's someone who knows how to use the sword of truth.
Anger and empathy must kiss.
Anything more we want to say? But we'll probably just talk about anger for years because it's so primary.
We sometimes think someone's choice to express anger is an unproductive way, is a will issue. Often it's a skill issue. Feeling hopeless and disconnected from empathy, we then lose the will to do what serves. But then we can change. Connection, awareness, inquiry. Krista Vorse.
Yeah, I would think that would probably be me. Where, was it just my will that I wasn't, or really I didn't have the skill? And that's where I love the Eastern.
When you say this is you, you're referring to
years
that
ago.
A lot when we were younger, when you.
Yeah, in the marriage.
Yeah, okay.
And where it was, that's what I value about the Eastern influences of the meditation and the inner stillness, which is a part of the Christian heritage. It's just, not in so much in the evangelical church, but it's in the more high church and Catholic and the saints and desert fathers and mothers. But that ability I wasn't taught how to handle my anger. And I wasn't taught anywhere. I learned it through the contemplatives. And how do you die a good death without putting yourself in dying to the healthy boundaries that would put you into harm's way? And so I was just caught in a no-win situation. So, sometimes when you see someone, it's that I just go, oh, they don't have the skill. It's a skill we're not taught. We're not taught how to work with anger enough, right?
Well, it's
not every.
I think
all.
that's ultimately what we're trying to do with this
That's
podcast
what this is about.
is bringing a lot of skills to people's lives.
Yeah.
I don't think most people have the skills to communicate their emotions without it being abusive. I think most people communicate their perspective in an abusive way. I don't think most people communicate when they are struggling through something in a healthy way. And that's
and abusive.
Those are the skills that we're trying to portray.
Yeah, like there could be a lot of abuse in any kind of a fight where it's just abusive. It's cruel. It's we've just bottled it up and then we spew it out.
Well, it's the inability to accept accountability for the role you played and projecting feelings onto the other person. So instead of acknowledging, yes, we all play a role, but usually from my experience where the abuse in a conflict comes from is when, okay, I'm willing to hear your problem, but you're unwilling to acknowledge the role you played in whatever this problem is. And so now you are projecting it all onto one person being fully bad into realizing, okay, maybe you did something to react a response out of me. Now you're just saying, oh, because I had that response, I'm the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Instead of understanding that we maybe both could adjust and interact better. And instead of, again, communicating a healthy boundary, it's about, you did this, you made me feel this way, it's your fault. And to me, that is abusive.
Yeah. Mark Goldstein teaches that empathy is a sensory experience. It activates the sensory part of our nervous system, which includes our mirror neurons. In contrast, anger is a motor action that's usually a reaction to some perceived hurt or injury by another person. The good news is that we can choose to shift ourselves from the motor brain to the sensory brain. Golston explains further that anger and empathy are like matter and antimatter. They can't exist in the same place at the same time. We have to let go of one to let the other in. When we're blaming, we can stop our angry rants when we shift ourselves into an awareness of what the other person is feeling. Empathy. So we can just choose. We can just choose to go, wait a minute. I am so heated. What would the other person be feeling right now?
Well, and it's gratitude is another one. You can't be grateful and angry at the same time. And one of my go-tos, especially when you know that whatever is making you angry is like 100% them. Like they're just projecting, you could clearly tell they're having a bad day. It has nothing to do with you. And instead of even responding to it, to me, the form of in my brain is, I'm so grateful I'm not dealing with whatever they're dealing with. Or I'm so grateful to live my life and not have to deal with whatever problems they have. Or,
That's good. That's good. How we work with anger and empathy is foundational. However, we're enormously complex, and I hate cookie-cutter approaches to anything. I'm a devoted synthesizer of tools and principles. Recently, I woke up to where I've centered my much-needed fire, my anger, by my empathy. I've not honored my anger that was the genius of my emotions wanting to honor my needs and values. It has never been good when I did that. It's a big way I've betrayed myself. I told myself I was fine, ignoring it. And I was all loving to be long-suffering in those situations. I'm convinced now I was way off the mark to not set boundaries around what didn't feel good to me. I've also lost my way by expressing too much anger at times, for sure. But hyper-empathy is also problematic. When something disturbs us, I call it hitting our whoa button. We don't want to shut off our whoa button automatically by making excuses for the other through hyper-empathy. We don't want to miss what we need to let register in us. And I even remember this person I was going to for healing. And when I was starting to just acknowledge some things that weren't okay, they were just so quick to go, oh, but they're just blah, 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 blah. They were so quick to push me into empathy when I was like, what? Like, I have hyper empathy. Like, I don't worry about that. I don't need to immediately be thinking about their point of view. It's like, no. I need to be sitting with my anger. And I didn't say anything, but I just thought, oh, that wasn't skilled. Make space for something to arise that, I'm weak in. I'm weak in acknowledging my anger.
This is just like the strengths are our weaknesses, right? So, it is such a beautiful strength to be so empathetic and to care and really be there and feel for other people. But just like it is your strength, it can easily be your weakness, where it is an opportunity for someone to take advantage of you if you don't have your discernment.
Oh, I know what it was. Yeah, I know what it was too. It was like I noticed I told someone something, and she was a woman in her 50s and a close friend, that was very alarming, very pathological. And she needed to know. And her reaction was like, oh my. She was like, oh my. She didn't ask any questions like, what? What? Tell me more. What do you mean by that? And I had shared that with this person I was going to for healing. And they just immediately goes, oh, well, that's their trauma. And I'm like, yeah, it's their trauma. Of course it's their trauma while you're splitting. Let's not minimize how disturbing the situation that this person is surrounded by all these people so traumatized that they just split from their discernment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to be really skilled to not do that to people, to not just go, oh, you need to be pushing on empathy. Like we need to drop into that infinity loop field when we are dealing with this with other people, to not be fixing them. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to allow what needs to allow.
We also don't want to lose
Yeah,
track.
we also don't want to lose track of connection and empathy. I was shamed by a quote-unquote spiritual teacher, my necessary nemesis. If I felt anger toward him, he said I wasn't having goodwill. What a manipulative, cultic bunch of crap. This is my solution to my problem. Anger and empathy must kiss. Feel the anger. Let it drop deep into your belly like a cannonball. It's safe there, grounding you in awareness, but isn't overtaking your brain. Yeah, just did this with a client, and it was so good. He got in touch with that, and that's what helped him set boundaries in all these different areas to find his voice. I'm like, yeah, just you need to honor that, man. Don't be afraid of that. Go to silence where awareness and connection to yourself and others will arise. I remember when I learned this, or invented this, or however Numinous Love taught me this. I was in the bathtub and something was hitting me, this anger, and I was like, oh, that's what it feels like in such inner stillness, because you can be in such, inner stillness in a bathtub around the warm water. And I'm like, oh, that's where it is. It's a cannonball right here. And I'm just so present that it's not all in my body that's reactive, that I need, I don't need to offload it when it's down in a safe place. I can really just sit with it. And then this truth, this force, this, your sacred survival instincts can come from there. To really protect yourself.
Well, it's like you feel it, let it become you, and then make a plan of your boundaries for it to not happen again. And once you kind of do that, it dissolves.
Yeah, and when you mean let it become you, meaning like incorporate it into your, like you don't need to run from it. You can hold it. You can even hold it in your body, go to silence where awareness and connection to yourself and others will arise. In inquiry, ask yourself, what is wanted or needed in this situation? That's a great Deepak Chopra thing. It's like once you've anyway gotten your physiology into the right place, then it's like, how do I move forward with love and compassion? What is needed in this moment?
Well, it's like when you're being abused, you don't take the moment to sit there and be quiet to be abused more. You get yourself out of the situation so then you can allow yourself to feel and go to the silence.
Yeah. Empathy will come from there. We're not ranting or blaming, but we're not betraying ourselves either. In that stillness, we may hold the clarity, this is not okay. What we permit, we promote. Principle may also be at play. We have our fire to move us. We're in the infinity loop of connection, awareness, and inquiry. We're protected in the loop that holds the fire of truth. We're grounded. In that grounding, we're connected to the ground of being. In that awareness, we return to our awareness of oneness, and empathy naturally arises from there. Even though I'm not you, I'm not other than you either. It holds both in a beautiful way. Our brains are able to hold it. It is truly a beautiful thing.
In the both and world of contemplative mind, in the infinity loop, how do you see yourself being able to hold both?
Okay. Yeah, in the contemplative mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a where are we?
It's the third question.
Oh, it's the third one? Mm-hmm. How do you see yourself being able to hold both? Journal about the tension and skill needed to not collapse. Censor discernment, become enabling or caretaking by hyper-empathy. Also not losing away by allowing rage and anger to blind you. So it's needing the whole the whole tool belt, right? You need to know the tension where you don't collapse, right? Which is almost like a PTSD response, where you collapse.
Well, it's like
The
collapsing
fawning.
inwards, you shut
or
down, you
yeah.
allow them to kind of continue to abuse you.
You disconnect from your power. You censor discernment. You become enabling. I mean, and you see that where people that have to be around. In fact, that woman who told me, you don't be taking the wounded male down. I saw when she was around that person where she would just dissociate. You just watch her and he would act out and she would just leave her body. She's like no longer there. And, you need all this you need work to come back into your body, to do the work, to feel the feelings, to journal. Journaling is so good. It's so good for us. So
is there an example where you couldn't feel empathy because your anger towards someone was overwhelming that you want to kind of end with? Kind of give them an example of how you used that and how you've now changed how you would interact differently.
So it's almost like you kind of act like a borderline personality disorder when you're caught in a really bad situation and you don't have the skill, where you go to this hyper empathy and constantly telling, journaling, thanking God for this person. And then they do something so outrageous, the anger that's all been unresolved and never dealt with, and no boundaries set and no guidelines of how you're going to move forward in this relationship becomes so intense that you're just feeling anger because you're like trying to get through to someone. It's absurd. It's absurd. You're trying to get through to someone. And then you realize how bad you behaved, and then you go back to the hyper empathy, and you did wrong, and nothing changed.
So would you say the consequence of kind of unregulated anger is that you then felt shame, which then continued to stay in an abusive relationship, right? So because you acted in what you would say shamefully, it pretty much it validated his bad behavior, which created this loop for you to continue to stay in this bad relationship. Yeah, you would agree with that? That's
yeah, it's like,
I've
even seen therapists where it's like, oh, let's deal with your anger with someone. When it's like, no, let's find out what is she so angry about,
I
or
agree.
what is he so angry about. And so I didn't really answer your question, but I was
think
trying
you
to
nailed
kind of, that we just, how do we, there's so many things we're just going to keep going over this and over this and over this, because this is foundational to what you said about how do we line up with our behavior with what we believe.
Right. Yeah. How do our beliefs and actions become one and the same? But then again, that's one more chapter on anger, and just want to thank everyone who's listening and joining us and watching us on this journey. Thank you so much. I hope this was another wonderful journey of tools that was helpful for you on communication, and please share with others. And until next time, thank you.